Setting up your webinar for Facebook Live. Come on. And the noise has started already.
Is that good?
Sorry, let me just come off this. I think we're good. Streaming live on Facebook. Wonderful. Okay, so good evening, ladies. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining us today as we discuss a pretty hot topic. League of Extraordinary Women is all about exploring and unpacking some of those topics that we may shy away from talking about, perhaps within a church setting. So I want to welcome the people who are joining us now on Zoom and all of those who are also joining us on Facebook. I want to thank you for being on time, for being part of the early crew. Some of you who've been on early, it's wonderful to connect with you all once again. We are going to start in literally about 2 minutes time, just to give an opportunity to those. I'm just going to check what's happening on Facebook. Sorry, ladies, I'm switching between 2 devices. I'm on Zoom here and on Facebook on my phone. That's the only way to manage this. Just want to make sure I can see it all good on Facebook as well. Ladies, how are you doing this evening?
Fine. Good, thank you. Doing good, looking forward. Yeah.
Good to be here.
Everyone else.
See, this is the thing. Technology is wonderful when it works. My phone currently is spinning, so I don't know what's happening, but I'm going to just trust that we are live on Facebook, and hopefully when this phone gets itself together, I'll be able to see what's happening. Sophie, I'm wondering if you could get started for us with a word of prayer.
Sure, no problem. Dear Heavenly Father, I pray that you be with us now as we enter into this conversation. I pray that you just guide our minds and that your Holy Spirit will guide our hearts and our words and help us to a place where people can be honest, but also where people who are listening can gain something or hear something that they needed to hear and to just be encouraged about who they are as women, whatever their race they might be. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Sophie. And thank you to all of you ladies who have made yourselves available this evening for us to have this very important conversation. It's gosh, I can't believe we're at the last session already. As most of you will know, we've been doing this each Friday throughout the month of October, where we've been unpacking topics that really don't get a lot of airplay. But now we are on to our final session for this series. We'll be back with more at a later date, but thank you again for everyone who has tuned in over the course of the series. I want to welcome those of you also who are just coming on. And I want to get started by reading to you something, ladies. Something that I found on the internet today. I've adapted it ever so slightly because it was quite a long read, but I thought it was quite powerful and really relevant to what it is that we're discussing today. And then we're gonna go straight into it and start to unpack this. And it's entitled, "The Strong Black Woman is Dead." On the 26th of October, 2018, at 11:55 p.m., while struggling with the reality of being a human instead of a myth, the strong Black woman passed away. Now, medical sources say she died of natural causes. But those who knew her know that she died from being silent when she should have been screaming, from milling when she should have been raging, from being sick and not wanting anyone to know because her pain might inconvenience them. She died from an overdose of other people clinging to her when she didn't even have energy for herself. She died from loving men who didn't love themselves and could only offer a crippled reflection. She died from raising children alone and for not being able to do a complete job. She died from the lies her grandmother told her mother and her mother told her about life, men, and racism. She died from being sexually abused as a child and having to take that truth everywhere she went, every single day of her life, exchanging the humiliation for guilt and back again. She died from being battered by someone who claimed to love her, and she allowed the battering to go on to show that she loved him too. She died from asphyxiation, coughing up blood from secrets she kept, trying to burn away, instead of allowing herself the kind of nervous breakdown she was entitled to, but only white girls could afford. She died from hiding her real feelings until they became hard and bitter enough to invade her womb and breasts like angry tumors. She died from always lifting something, from heavy boxes to refrigerators. She died from being responsible because she was the last rung on the ladder and there was no one under she could dump on. She died from sacrificing herself for everybody and everything, when what she really wanted to do was be a singer, a dancer, or some magnificent other. The strong Black woman is dead. Now, ladies, when I came across this earlier today, it gave me goosebumps because I don't know about you, but I could relate to some of those lines in that poem. I don't even know who wrote it. I was trying to find the name of the writer so I could give credit to them. But it was something that I found really, really powerful. And I just wanted to know if any of you ladies were able to hear anything in there that you could relate to, anything that really touched you or really got to you from that poem that I just shared.
I think for me, I wasn't sure if anyone was going to go first, but I'll go. The line about died of natural causes, she didn't die of natural causes. And it just really stuck out to me for the idea of the strong Black woman, in the idea that this isn't something that dies by itself. It's not something that can just disappear. It's something that you have to be aware of or awakened to, that maybe you're playing into this myth, that maybe all of these things about who you should be as a woman or as a Black woman are things that have all been maybe placed on you or put on you, or the idea of what you think it should be. And there is no freedom from it without actually saying, I'm actually, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm actively going to break free of it. It's not just going to happen by itself. I have to actually say, I don't want to play into this anymore. I don't want to follow this narrative anymore. So yeah, it was really, but that was one line that stood out to me. I was writing notes on it.
I think there was a bit in there you mentioned about silence, you know. I think there was a bit, and I think the silence is that, you know, having to keep silent about things, not talking, not sharing, not being open, just keeping it silent. So you're unhappy, but you keep silent because you're expected to be silent. You know, you're in pain, you're expected to be silent. If you have a family, you're looking after your family, you're expected to be silent. You know, you're looking after your children. Like, I'm a mother, so looking after my children are older now. So even now, I have to be silent because they have their problems and I'm dealing with their problems. So my son might have a problem, my daughter might have a problem, other one, or something's going on, an issue. So I can't say to them, this is how I'm feeling. Because so that stands out for me as well. It's like the bit of silence, because that can be quite grueling, I think.
That resonates for me is that, because when I think of strong Black woman, I think of SBW. I mean, that's the term that they use, SBW, strong Black woman. But if you can also insert single Black woman, SBW again. And one of the things that came out of that poem was the relationship between singleness and strength. And even for women who are in the relationship, you know, it's the singleness of mind and that sort of the sense that you have to go it alone, even, you know, that I think it has been normalized within the Black community. And the strong Black woman isn't just something that, I'm sure it's probably an American writer. I've come across that poem before.
Okay.
And it's American women, African American women, it's African Caribbean women, it's African British women, it's African Mauritian women. You know, there's a relationship between those cultures, sort of Creole societies or the African diaspora, and the presence of that narrative. So there's, you know, it's a psychological thing, but it's also something that is endemic within the social fabric of those cultures.
Well, listen, ladies, just from what you shared, lots of questions have already jumped out at me that I really want to ask you. But before I even get into any of that, I've gotten carried away with myself and I've completely forgotten to ask the So, ladies, if one by one, you can let our viewers, both here on Zoom and on Facebook, know who you are, so they can get a bit of an insight into who you are and to where you're coming from.
Right, I'm Faye Lindo, and I run a counselling agency in Watford. I've just started, actually, not just a few years now. So I'm in private practice. So it's just my private practice counselling agency. So that's who I am. And
okay, well, I'm Val Bernard Allen, and I'm a sociologist. I'm a lecturer, and I've conducted research on Black single Seventh-day Adventist women.
Thank you.
Okay, my name is Sophie Holder. I'm someone who feels very passionate about being a Black woman, but also I'm someone who has had a mental health condition. I would call myself probably someone who is still suffering, but also a survivor. So this is a conversation that is very apt to my life. So I feel very passionate about it.
Okay. Well, ladies, Faye, Val, Sophie, thank you so much for being with us this evening. And for those of you who are joining us just now on Facebook, what I'm going to ask you to do is if you can click that share button so that we can ensure that more ladies around the world of social media will be able to tune in and will be able to get some value from what is going to be shared from some of these incredibly amazing women. I'm privileged to know each of them personally, and I know that they have such incredible value to share, hence why I've asked them to join us today. So go ahead and click that share button so that we can ensure that this reaches those who really need to hear what's going to be shared tonight. Ladies, I want to ask you, and this is not only a question for those of you on the panel, this is for those of you who have tuned in on Zoom, it's for those of you who are tuning in on Facebook. Please let me know what you think of, what kind of pictures, what kind of ideas come to mind when you hear that term or that phrase, strong Black woman. What does it mean to you?
I said earlier, the lady, remember Gone with the Wind?
Yes, Mammy.
In the kitchen, and she's doing everything, you know. She's silent, but you know, and also she's pacifying as well, but she sees everything and keeping everything in the house in order. And so when you said that, I thought about her, but I don't know much about her life beyond. I know she was, you know, she's an actress, but I don't know what her life was like after Gone with the Wind and what she had to endure. But that image of the mammy, is it the mammy in the kitchen?
Mammy, her name's Mammy.
Yeah, her that because she's, you know, she's strong in that position, but actually, is she strong in that position?
She was actually the Hattie Daniels. She was the first African American woman to win an Oscar. She won a Best Supporting Oscar for Gone with the Wind. Up until Halle Berry was actually kind of like the curse because no one had ever won Best Actress. They'd only won Best Supporting. And I think even casting a Black woman in that role is to saying, this is the role that we at the pinnacle, that she's being rewarded for by what some would class as the highest award that you can give in acting. And just that kind of whole idea around seeing how Black women should be as the kind of side character, but yet, like you said, holding it all together, being everything that Scarlett O'Hara needed, the one who stood by her when a lot of other people left her behind, and yet it was just, not something that I guess nowadays many of us would want to identify ourselves with.
And Val, before I come to you, Val, I just want to just go to some of the comments because they're coming in. So I've asked the question, what do we think of when we hear that term strong Black woman? So one of our participants on Zoom has said they think of assertive, independent, confident, and a go-getter. Someone else has said that a strong Black woman is almost expected. Oh dear, we've jumped down, hold on. Strong Black woman is almost expected to be superhuman, expected to juggle everything flawlessly. And then someone else has said, men tell me I need to pipe down because their egos struggle with that. Their egos struggle with that and they deem it aggressive. And then someone else has chimed in and said, yep, that's true. Men find it almost impossible to handle them. I'm really fascinated by some of the language that's coming out here. And then on Facebook, we've got Mammy, such a negative image, in my opinion. And Hazel, that's from you on Facebook. Hazel, please give us some more on why do you consider that to be a negative image? I'm going to be asking the same question to the ladies shortly, but let me just hear from Val. What is it that comes to mind when you hear the term strong Black woman?
I don't just get one image, because obviously in my research I've dealt with this issue, so I get multiple sort of images and concepts that come to my head. But certainly the one in Gone with the Wind, she's classified as, you know, sort of the asexual Black woman who holds it together. She's usually very spiritual, and usually very big and dark skinned, you know, so she typifies that, and her strength comes from her ability, as you've all said, you know, to sort of hold everything together in a domestic space. She occupies the domestic space. And then you have Jezebel, you know, sort of the image of the woman who's really hypersexual. So whereas one is asexual, the other one is excessively sexual, and you see a lot of those depictions on the media. And her strength is in her sexual sort of energy. So that's the hypersexual strong Black woman. And then you get the one that's loud. She's called Sapphire. You know, these are sort of like American images, and she's the sort of Sapphire image, and she's a single mother. She's loud, you know, she's the one that's on unemployment benefit, and nobody can speak to her. And her strength is with her mouth, and her strength is in her rudeness and the way that she occupies space. And she doesn't stay a lot in the domestic space. She's out in the public space, making a spectacle of herself. So those are three sort of broad stereotypes. One's extremely sexual, one doesn't have any sexuality, and the other one has too much mouth. You know, so and there are other images as well. Yeah, that's what sort of comes to my mind.
Now, in the context of what we're discussing today, like today's, the title of today's presentation is called The Demise of the Strong Black Woman. I'm particularly interested in, so another comment has just come in before I go on. So we have Zari Hall says, I think of Michelle Obama, strong, educated, beautiful, determined, and humble. So someone else has said a Viola Davis character. Hazel, are you saying that's the negative image? Just confirm that for me, because I don't want to jump to any conclusions. You know, it's clear to see that different ideas and different images come to mind when we hear this term strong Black woman. But I want us to just cast our minds back real quick to the poem that I shared earlier. You know, and I want us to look at it from that perspective for a short while. But before we can even get there, I want to ask you ladies a question, and this is for the ladies both on Facebook, on Zoom, and to our wonderful panel. Ladies, how do you define strength? This is a conversation that I was having with Faye earlier this morning, because I think we have really different ideas about what strength really is. Because here's what I will tell you. If strength is defined by what we read in that poem, I don't have any interest in being strong, because I don't want that for me. I don't know about you, but I certainly don't want that for me. I don't want that to be my story, that I died emotionally because I was carrying everyone else's burden and I had nowhere to dump my own. Or I don't want to be, I don't want to suffer because I want to scream on the outside, but I'm expected to hold it together and, you know, experience all the trauma, experience all the pain, and do it with a beautiful smile on my face. That's not the kind of strength that I'm interested in. So, but ladies, tell me, when you hear the word strength, what does that mean? What does that mean to you? What does it mean to be strong in the true sense of the word?
I think.
Go on, Sophie.
Go, Sophie.
I think it's really changed for me as I've gotten a bit older, to be honest.
That's a great. All right, so Sophie, tell me what it was before and what it has moved to now. Tell me.
To be honest, I really actually I had to laugh, chuckle to myself. Like, I really kind of understood and resonated when Val was talking about the different types of women and the Sapphire. So that kind of loud, kind of like you're willing to take anything on, like you were not going to be taken for a ride, you were going to let people know, that kind of like outwardly strong, a little bit abrasive. That's probably what I saw it as when I was younger, to be kind of like strong and like I'm gonna like stand up for myself and stand for what was I, not be taken advantage by anybody. And in that sense, then vulnerability was a weakness. But then as you get older, and I think as I've gone through different forms of counseling, my gauge on what strength is has completely changed. So the idea of assertiveness for me is strength. To be able to say what you want, but to say it and communicate it in a way that people might be upset or a little offended, but they understand and they know that it's not coming from a bad place and that reconciliation can be happening. To me, that is strength. To be able to do that in my relationships, friendships, is strength. Vulnerability now is strength. To be able to put yourself out there when you see someone willing to take a step and to shed a layer of themselves or to break down a wall if somebody else isn't even doing that, and to be able to see that is necessary and to be able to step out and do that, for me, that is strength. And as I've done that, my gauge on what the strong Black woman is has kind of changed with it as well. So this kind of stereotypical, we can do anything and we can do it alone. It's kind of like, well, alone. Why? Why is that strength? Why is that necessary?
I want to just go to some of the comments that are coming in. So I think it's Charity who said that the definition of strength, which she's got resilience, embracing vulnerability. So kind of along the same lines as what you shared, Sophie. Strength is Alison saying humility, intellect, being affectionate, having boundaries, true to self, being wise, a quiet confidence, emphatic, empathetic, I'm assuming. Yeah, empathetic. Sorry, guys, I just about read. I left my glasses.
No,
go ahead, Faye.
No, for me, I think strength. I think for me, what I thought was strength was this confidence, which I think is a fake type of confidence. So whatever you do, you have to do confidently. You had to say things a certain way, you had to speak a certain way and behave a certain way confidently. You had to seem as though you knew what you were talking about. Whereas now I realize strength is probably being honest, being able to go to my children, for instance, who are quite a main part of my life at the moment, and say, I'm sorry for me to be able to say, this is what I'm feeling. I'm feeling rubbish at the moment. I'm feeling tired. I'm feeling drained. I'm feeling, I think once I was saying to Naomi today, which I shared in church, I was feeling overwhelmed, or maybe not, the word wasn't overwhelmed. What was the word I used? It was a word I used that you shouldn't use in church. And I remember being horrified, because I use this word. And for me, and that wasn't seen as strength, because you're not supposed to say you feel.
Let me just say, it wasn't a swear word, ladies, for anyone who's wondering.
I'm talking, I cannot remember.
It wasn't a bad word.
It was a word like, I'm feeling overwhelmed. It wasn't overwhelmed. It was one of those words that is basically saying, this is how I'm down at the moment, and I'm feeling like this. And people came to me afterwards and saying, you shouldn't have said that, because actually for them that was a show weakness. And for me, that's always been, if I speak out what I feel, I don't keep it. So if I'm feeling down, I'll say, I'm feeling down. So I think for me, I'm learning that is strength, not to be afraid to speak and to say what's going on inside, because I keep it inside, it's more detrimental than out.
How about you, Auntie Belle?
I'm just sitting here and I'm just thinking about, the question's a personal question, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a personal question. So I suppose, when I was growing up, my mom used to say, you have to be strong, I used to get a lot of that, so it's about resilience, but it was about staying power, and it was about closing down your emotions and pushing through at all odds. But it was also about, from what my mother taught me, it was about residing closely with God and to take your strength from that. So those were sort of my early memories of strength. And I remember having experiences when I was quite young where I had to employ that, that way of being resilient.
Mm.
But one of the things, people may have heard me say this before, my father used to tell me that I was a princess. He would say, you're royalty. Every night when he told a bedtime story, that's how he would end the story. He would say, Uno is royalty, you know. And so I really thought I was a princess. When I was at school and things were difficult, I would draw on that. I would sort of combine what my mom told me about being strong and my dad saying you're royalty. And then I found that I was able to get through very difficult situations as a young child and as a teenager. So that's how I saw it. But then, having looked at the whole thing academically, this idea of the strong Black woman, because it comes up, it was very pertinent. It was a loud concept that I had to deal with in my research. I've come to understand that it fulfills a social function. It fulfills a hierarchy. There are social arrangements, there are stratas, and groups are placed in certain stratas. And the Black woman, she holds a position within certain societies for a reason. The concept of the strong Black woman didn't just pop out of nowhere. It was an expression of an economic, social, political and gendered arrangement that Black women found themselves in. And it was a way of making sense of that madness. And that memory has passed on. It's a dangerous memory. And I hear what people have said about Michelle Obama being resilient and beautiful and intelligent and educated and whatever. And I agree with that. But if you think about it, Michelle Obama was practically holding the world in her hands, you know, and holding the world at bay. She, you know, her husband was the leader of the world, you know, in a sense, because he was president of America. And the onslaughts that she had to take as a Black woman, and the onslaught, what she had to manage to hold her family together in that very public space, speaks of, you know, Sapphire, speaks of, you know, the sort of like asexual Black woman, spiritual, resilient, you know, she sort of covered the whole lot and more, and gave more to it as well, despite the fact that her husband publicly loved her and whatever, but she practically cared for the world in a sense, and had to care for her family. So yeah, so she, you know, we look to her, and she's unique in a sense. She's definitely an expression of these multiple, I don't know, depictions of strength, Michelle Obama, and that must have been terrible. That must have been terrible.
Well, I was thinking about when you were talking about the necessity of the role and why it came about because of like economical reasons and societal reasons. Do you think that when Black women kind of took on this role in order to kind of find a function in society, that they could have gotten through any other way if they hadn't decided that they were just going to grin and bear and then put emotions to the side and just power through? Do you think it actually served the function, or do you think that there was another way for them to have kind of gotten through at the time? Or?
Yeah, they didn't have any other choice. It was that, or that was an act of survival.
Yeah.
And the construction of the strong Black woman constructs something else, which is the weak Black man.
Yes.
And slaveocracy needed a weak Black man.
Yeah.
And so, and those economic and political arrangements have continued to this day. I do think that the church, though, is a space, you know, sort of Black churches, Black-led churches are the spaces where some of those arrangements are challenged. But generally in society, the economic situation needed the Black man to be controllable and policed. And so the way that it's played out is that the Black woman's role was to police the Black man as well, in line with the slave master.
So you're saying she was therefore put before him, and he was put behind her. Does that? You know,
she was. Yeah, in a
reverse.
Yeah, and so he tried to protect his group, his community, and his family, but wasn't allowed to. And so once the slaveocracy could generate a narrative of the weak Black man and create one of the strong Black woman, it meant that slavery could continue. slavery could continue. And of course, black men rebelled and, you know, fought back, but the general impact of those arrangements was to ensure that slavery continued and continued for a very long time.
Let me just jump to some of the comments that are coming in at the moment. So Sharon has just going back a little bit, has mentioned that, again, being vulnerable, I guess, is her idea of being strong. Then we've got one of our gentlemen who's joined us before. Alan says, strong black woman as opposed to a weak black woman, question mark. What is the definition of a weak black woman? The definition is subjective. He also goes on to ask, are there strong white women or strong Asian women or strong Chinese women? Asking for a friend.
That's a really good question. That is a really good question. I mean, the others are good as well, but I like that question. I mean, actually, can I just jump in?
Go ahead, yeah, please.
Because these, you know, you've got concepts in other cultures like the superwoman, you know, that sort of, there's a generic sort of superwoman or independent or assertive woman, you know, but the strong black woman is particular to black women in general, women from the African diaspora, women from the African continent, but particularly those who went through enslavement. And when I did my research and I asked participants to describe themselves, I was amazed at how they expressed it. I'm a strong black woman, you know, like SBW. It was just coming over and over again. And in the narratives, when I was analyzing the narratives, it was coming up, you know, as a strong black woman, blah, 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 blah. And then I had to ask the question, where did that come from? Why is it so consistent? And why do we smile when we say that? It's so consistent, and it's the same in America. And there's a woman called, a scholar called La Fontaine Boubouf, who's actually done her, you know, years of research on the strong black woman. And she argues that it's about breaking down that myth, because she links it with ill health. There's a relationship between the strong black woman and ill health. So she's really sort of like pushing forward a challenge to that concept, how it emerged. It's something that's particular to particular cultural gendered identities. It's not a term. So no, you don't get strong Irish woman or strong Chinese woman, or, you know, you know, maybe an individual may say that, but it's not consistent across a gendered cultural group.
So are you saying it's a negative? It's a negative because
I'm not saying it's a negative. I'm saying it's there.
I wonder, is it a term that was put on us as to say that we're strong, but it's a way of hiding the fact that there's no strength in that. There's no strength in that term. The strong black woman, the one that had to endure, you know, in silence, the one that had to see her children, as you said, through slavery being given away, the one that had to see her husband being beaten, her partner, you know, her family separated, so she had to endure silence. So actually the strength was, they're saying the strength was in our silence. We couldn't complain, we couldn't say anything. So that makes us strong. And I was thinking, is the strong black woman the same as the powerful? Because, you know, we're not called the strong black women, we're just the strong black woman. Difference between those two.
Well, I want us to just touch on something that Auntie Val mentioned. You talked about the link between the strong black woman and ill health. And I want us to just stay there for a moment. I really want to ask the question, and again, this question goes to those of you who are online, those of you who have joined us on Facebook. Looking at the strong black woman from the context that Faye has just mentioned, the woman who has to endure in silence, the woman who has to keep up this persona of being okay and being all right in the face of adversity and through trauma. Can you identify in your own life or in the lives of people that you know, specific times when this strong black woman thing has caused ill health, has caused, whether it be your mental health, whether it be physically? Can you identify a time when this idea has had a negative impact on your life or the lives of those around you. And again, this question is not just to our panelists, it's to those of you watching at home or wherever you may be, whether you're on Facebook or on Zoom. But I'm going to start with our panelists. Ladies, have you ever experienced that for yourselves? And please only share what you feel comfortable to share.
I remember when we moved to Watford about, say, 20 something years ago, and I had my small, and I remember I was sharing with Naomi this morning this image of me, waking up every morning crying, I'm waking up every morning, not unsure how the day was going to go, and having this image of me running down the road screaming, but then on Sabbath I'd go to church and I'd be smiling. But actually, so there was at home, there was this, inside I was like falling apart, not falling, but trying to keep it all together. But but when my husband came home, or when I went to church, it was all together. But it wasn't, because internally I probably was depressed. I probably had a bit of postnatal depression or depression going on. There was stuff going on, but it wasn't able, there was no place to share it. There was no place to bring that out. On the surface, I was, I cooked, I cleaned, I was, I was a vegan, I was all those good things that seemed on the surface, but internally there was a lot of turmoil going on. That was, so for me, I don't know if that was strength, but on the outside, everything was maintained, but it wasn't good.
Before anyone else jumps in, I want to just go to some of our comments coming in on Zoom. So Alison says that, yes, it results in many mental health issues. Women bury their wounds, never talk about deep emotional pain because they need to fit in with the status quo. I know that I can certainly relate to that. That was certainly my experience for a time. I remember the darkest time in my life, on the inside, but on the outside, you would never know it, because this smile was kept on, like, constantly. If Sophie asked me how was I doing, the answer would be, I am great, how are you? That's just what it would naturally be. In fact, Sophie, I talked about this, was it maybe last week? I was talking about a conversation that you and I had years ago at camp meeting. I don't know if you can remember it, but it was a time of of some crisis in my life. It was you, Sophie, it was your sister, and a couple other ladies, and we were talking, and you were the one who mentioned it, that in church, the worst thing that we can stand up and say is, brothers and sisters, I did not read my Bible this week, or I didn't study my lesson this week. And that was as deep as it got. And I remember, Sophie, we were talking about what was going on with me at the time, and it was only because of the relationship that we had why you would even know what was going on with me. But that's not something that you put out there. You keep your business to yourself. You don't go and put your business out there. You got to put on that smile. You got to pull yourself together. You got to be made of stronger stuff than that. And you just got to get on with it. And it just makes me, I remember I was dying inside, or at least that's what it felt like. Those times when you cry only when no one's looking. Never let them see you cry. Never let them see you feeling, looking weak, having to keep this up. And I just think it's so unhealthy, because what happens when you're bottling up all of this stuff? Like, I'll never forget, there's an image I will never ever forget as long as I live. It was the funniest thing ever. My dad was cooking. He was in the kitchen and he was using a pressure cooker to boil some peas or something. I don't know what he was doing. And I was young, and he's cooking, doing whatever he's doing his thing. Then all of a sudden, I heard what I could only describe as a gunshot. Yeah, that's what it sounded like. And I come into the kitchen now, and I see my dad like this. He's gonna kill me when he watches this. I see my dad like this. There's a crack on the ceiling. Like the pressure cooker, he hasn't released the pressure properly before he's taken off the lid. It shot up into the air, and he said, "Wow, that could have been dangerous." That image stayed in my mind, because I just think sometimes our emotions can be like that. Like, Faye, we were talking about this. Sometimes when you're seeing this angry Black woman, or this person who is loud and brawlish, and so it's not necessarily because they're just a horrible person or just a rude person, but it is that constant suppression of stuff. Life happens to all of us, but when we're constantly suppressing and having to then, you know, put on the smile and act as though we're okay, you're only human, you're not a machine. There's only so much you can take before you completely blow. And so I know that was, you know, going through some of my stuff was during the times when I realized, actually, this is having such a negative impact on me, because what was happening is my opinions of myself were changing from the inside out. It wasn't Faye saying, Naomi, you're rubbish. It wasn't Val saying, Naomi, you're inadequate. It wasn't Sophie saying, Naomi, nothing is ever going to work for you. It was me internalizing everything, trying to deal with it all by myself, not wanting to be a burden on anyone else. That was having a negative impact on the way I even began to view myself. But I see you smiling there. What's going through your mind?
I'm just looking at you and thinking, wow. That's what I think. I'm really enjoying what she's saying and the way she's saying it, and she's just expressing it. It's so beautiful. And I'm sort of contrasting and thinking about the sisters that I've had in my life who have supported me. You know, and I think all of us can point to women and men in our lives that have supported us through difficult times. And I do hear what you're saying about the silence, and there is a lot of silence, and particularly within religious spaces. Religious spaces are places where you're not really allowed to say certain things, as we've already discussed. So yeah, it would be difficult, but there are, and I think for me, I was just reflecting on the people that have supported me through my dark moments, and how I've gained as a result of that, and it makes me sensitive to others because of the support that I've had. But I remember, and then I started thinking about when I met my second husband. I've only got one. You know. That sounded wrong, didn't it? Hold on a minute, that doesn't sound right. But anyway,
adding them up.
I remember feeling really uncomfortable when we were dating. And one day I broached the conversation and the things that were concerning me. And I remember sort of stumbling over my words and saying to him, I'm not feeling very comfortable with this relationship. And I think I know what it is. I think that you're taking away something that's so important to me. And he was like, how so? And I said, you know, I fight for everything. Wow. I fight for everything. And, you know, you're here, you won't even let me, you're just doing it. Because he's very good at sort of preempting what my needs are. And he's doing that when we were going out. He's still doing that, in fact. And I found that really troubling. I thought, you're taking something from me. I struggle, I get through, and then I pat myself on the back. You're not allowed to come in and take that away from me. And, you know, I had to work that through, because he says, well, I've come to help you so that you can help others, you know. So when he said you can help others, that bit of it, I clung to it, you know, because all right, then, if you're going to help me to help others,
I can accept that help.
Yeah, I can accept your help. And there's a woman that's done some research in America. She did her report came out in 2008, and it is I think she's a psychotherapist. And no, actually, it's come out quite recently. It might have been earlier this year. And she was saying, she sort of classified what a strong Black woman is. And she was saying one of the characteristics is, you know, we don't want to accept help. So she's created a framework for finding the strong Black woman in order to help Black women to self-identify and then find healing. But one of the things she remarks on is that, you know, they don't want to accept help, and it's difficult, and they are actively involved in colluding with this identity strong Black woman.
Wow.
You know.
Yeah.
Ladies, let me just jump to the comments real quick before we come to your other point. So we got someone on Zoom is saying, unfortunately, many people end up displacing their pain and anger on others, such as children, family members, etc., who in turn end up wounded, and the cycle continues. and it can result in generations of fake, confused, and emotionally unstable people. Authenticity is key to good mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual health. Thank you so much for that, Alison.
Can I just pick up on that one, Naomi?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
I think I agree with what I think you said Alison was saying, but also I think it's very difficult because something I always say is that I feel like we are now in the generation where we can actually see the things that were happening in the past and actually make sense of what was going on. And I think a lot of times the things that we might have been passed down to us from strong mothers or strong grandmothers or whatever, they weren't aware of what was going on. Or like I heard someone say in church, actually, you know, all this mental health thing is this new stuff. Our grandparents never had it. They just got on with things and they never complained and they blah, blah. And someone else was just like, they didn't know what it was called. They didn't have the options. They didn't have the know-how. They didn't have the understanding. And I think as much as like, so for me, I have an eating disorder. And I think for me, I can very clearly see how the idea of, so it can be triggered by different things, by life events or whatever. And for me, it was actually my sister getting married and meaning that me and my sister would no longer live together. So what would that mean? Where would I go? How would I be able to afford to live in London by myself? And then when I went to like therapy, we had to trace back all these various events in my life where I would eat instead of talk. So I would just overeat instead of talking about the situation. And I had to see that actually this is something I can see a pattern of in my family, not necessarily the eating, but the idea of what do you do in difficult situations when you can't talk about it, or there isn't a place for it, or you don't know how to, or it was so traumatic that you don't know how to deal with it. And sometimes we pass on these behaviors not willingly and not consciously, but because it's the only thing that people have seen. So I think we have to be really careful in saying that, oh, you know, we're passing it down to our children. You have to have a certain level of self-awareness to be understanding that you're doing that. But I feel like we are now at a place where we can start to say, actually, I don't even want to say the sins of my mother or the sins of my father, but you understand what I mean, that actually now I want to kind of put an end to that and say, I don't want to repeat that cycle that is going on. But yeah, I think with mental health, it was actually when I started to get help that I actually felt more lonely as a Black woman, because a lot of the therapy sessions that I went to or group therapy, there was no Black women, it was just me. With predominantly white women and me. And when I would talk to women of the Black community or Black people in general, they wouldn't understand, from my experience, I can only speak of, a Black person having an eating disorder. It was kind of like, why would you have that? Why would you suffer with that? Like, what is the problem? And I remember feeling very alone then as a Black woman, like, who is there who can identify with something that I'm going through? And I was actually, once I gave an unwitting testimony at church, I didn't think I was going to do it, but I just kind of was like, yeah, I'm suffering from eating disorder, let me know. And I started crying, and I had people coming up to me afterwards, other Black women saying, oh, you know, I've suffered with the same thing. I've suffered with this. And I was actually shocked by the women who were saying this, and it made me feel a little sad, actually, because I'm just kind of like, so there's other of us out here suffering with this, but we're suffering alone because of the stigma of the Black woman, of like suffering with something that we don't suffer with. You know, people didn't suffer with that. You know, there was a lack of this stuff. There was a lack of food growing up. Why would you not eat food when there was? So all these different things that are going on. So I think it is very key to mental health, but it's about learning new ways to kind of cope and to deal with things. Because from my experience, that has been very much what I've seen with mental health, is the space to actually talk about what's going on in our head, rather than not actually sometimes taking it out on children, but taking it out on ourselves.
Wow. Thanks so much for sharing, Sophie. Thank you. One of the other comments that I wanted to go to before I continue with the rest of you ladies, just bear with me. Just trying to get back to Facebook. Sharon, one of our panelists from last week, has chimed in and shared something that I wanted to add to the conversation. My phone is really playing up. While I'm trying to get that up, trying to get that going, let me go to some of them that are coming in on Zoom. Mona says, sometimes we associate strength with aggression towards our spouses and or our children. How do we disassociate the two? So I'm going to put that question to you ladies on the panel.
Say that again, to the question again.
I'm going to say it again. So she says, sometimes we associate strength with aggression towards our spouses and or our children. How do we dissociate the two? So I'm getting tongue-tied.
I wonder if you think strength, sometimes could strength be what you think is fear. You're fearful, fearful about many different things that's going on. And so that comes out in aggression. So, I mean, that's how I think that's how I understand it. I think you disassociate. I think strength can be misinterpreted for strength. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Say that again. It broke up for a second.
Fearful. You can be really fearful, but it comes out seemingly that it's it's strength. You're fearful about whatever's going on inside. You can't express it, as you said before. You can't share. Church isn't the place where you can say, "I'm feeling depressed. I'm struggling." That's what I remember now. I'm struggling with whatever. You can't say that. It doesn't give you the platform to do that. So therefore, you're fearful inside, but what comes out can appear to be aggression. Take it. So it might come out on your children, it might come out on your husband, but actually, if you could identify that actually what you're feeling or experiencing is fear, anxiety, but again, you can't. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah.
Go on, Sibel.
I'm sort of struggling with the question, but I think Faith probably helps to understand what.
I'm trying to understand the question as well. Yeah.
What Sharon's asking. So I think Sharon's asking, how do we stop our negative feelings being passed on to our children or anybody else?
Taking it out on people.
So it's recognizing what you're feeling.
Yeah, in an aggressive way. So I think you have to give people, the people in your sphere, permission to challenge you. To challenge you. I mean, one of the things that I did when I was a single mother, I call it the take it back principle. So I would get my children to make me take back my aggression, because I understood that when we feel aggressive because we're fearful or whatever, and we pass that on, that actually is lived out in our children's lives. We have a responsibility to speak affirming words to navigate our children's future. But what we do, particularly in our community, because our community, the sort of like the foundation of our community is a lot of pathology and cursing and abuse. That was the formation of what we call sort of Caribbean culture. All oppressed cultures are sort of complex where they have the good and the bad, but the beginning of the Caribbean culture was through abuse. And so that was the only reason why people went to the Caribbean. Most people went there because they had to go, they were forced. And so we've eked out this culture, which is about, the fear and the aggression and the strong black woman and the weak black man. And then the language is an expression of those things. And as women, we have inherited that memory, and we have inherited the behaviors that ensure that those are, that we remain in the same position. So we use our mouths on our children or on our partners or on our brothers or whatever, and curse them because of our frustrations. But that has deep spiritual implications that we don't fully understand. And not even on a psychological level, it perpetuates that very culture that has caused the pathology. It perpetuates that root. So you've got to give people permission in order to stop that stronghold. You have to give people permission to challenge you and to learn to be silent and surrender when you're being challenged, because you're being challenged to stop the poison from continuing.
You have to be aware of it, though, don't you?
Yeah.
You have to be aware.
You have to be aware of it. So the work that you're doing, and us having this conversation, in the work that I'm doing, and other people are actually, there's an amazing renaissance taking place within the Black community globally, where there's an understanding, as Sophie was saying, we're able to now look back and to see what happened and what is happening to us. We've got the space to do that now. We have the language to do that, and we have the expertise to hang our understandings on. So there is a renaissance taking place, and this conversation is part of that renaissance, and I thank God for that, you know.
And I think one thing that I would add to the question that was said is something that I was gonna say my boyfriend, my husband said to me. I'm newly married if you're listening, so I'm getting used to calling him my husband. But he was saying this idea of, in terms of Christianity, and I think this definitely passes over, is one thing that the early church understood was that they were a constantly growing church. They didn't know it all, and they were constantly had to grow things and to learn things and to understand things. And I think that for me is something that is very key in being in a relationship, in having a spouse, and one day having children, and for people having children. No, breaking down, I would guess again from this Caribbean mentality. I'm a person with Caribbean descent, so that's the only descent that I can talk about. In that the parent is always right. The child doesn't know just because they're a child. So anything that they do know is just automatically just, that can't be right. As Val said, if they're challenged on, you know, mummy, I didn't like the way that you said that to me, it's kind of like, how dare you speak back to me? And I think it's about having a willingness to learn and to grow as a parent, to understand that you don't know it all. And to know that this kind of understanding and growth can come from anywhere. I saw an interview with Jay-Z, and he was talking to, I think it was David Letterman, and he was talking about how healthy his child was. And he started talking about how emotionally healthy his child was. And it actually passed David Letterman by. And I was thinking, no, what he actually said was very profound, because Jay-Z was saying how he has come to this new level of awareness as a father and a husband because he had cheated on his wife, and in order to keep onto the relationship and keep onto the marriage, he went through counseling, which really opened up everything from his mother's sexuality to his concept of being a man to everything. And he was like, he then said, my child is so healthy. She's so healthy in that I told her we were going to school, and I said to her, get in the car, we need to go, we're running late. And he said, as we were driving, she said, you know, Daddy, it really hurt my feelings the way that you said that to me, to tell me to get into the car. And he was like, do you see how healthy my child is? And David Letterman was kind of like, oh yeah, and kind of moved on. And I was kind of like, you need to pause on what he's saying. He's saying his child is in a relationship with her father where she is so comfortable. She can say to him, Daddy, I was hurt by something you said. And she knows from the statement that what she's saying is going to be understood, it's going to be respected, she's not going to be belittled, and she's not going to be shut down. And you have to be willing to grow and create these spaces now and say, I don't want to do what's created for me. And it's not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy thing to not do, to just not lash out when something has been said to you, when that's all you've ever known, or that's all your parents have ever known. And you have to be willing to do better than what was done to you. And it's just, as Val said, it's a continual journey. It's not something that we're going to sum up in this generation. It's because it's been hundreds of years in the making.
No, it's so true. I want to really just touch, finally found the comment that I wanted to share. And it's from Sharon. She doesn't mind me sharing this on here. And she says, I had to overcome the strong Black woman in a domestic and in a domestic abusive relationship. She says that she went through a really challenging time. She's shared more of this on the comments, so for those of you who are on Facebook, feel free to be able to have a read. But she says that she had to learn to put herself first. She had to recondition herself to hear her inner voice and speak up for herself as she was becoming fragmented. She had to make herself whole by restoring me, learning to love, appreciate, and put herself first for once again. So she says that she was being wife, mum, and employee, wearing many hats, and my inner self was unhappy, and I was allowing an abusive relationship to destroy my very self. It started to affect my health. I woke up and took notice. After months of investigation, the NHS consultants informed me if I didn't do something differently, this condition was fatal. It took a while, she said, but she realized she had to do it for her in terms of, and this is from the perspective of how her children then were able to cope in seeing what she was experiencing, and she was still expected to be mummy and expected to do all the things that mummy's supposed to do, even though she was going through a domestically, an abusive relationship and domestic violence. And she said she realized that if I, as mum, wasn't good, then they, as the children, couldn't be good. And I guess that's another situation where, it's weird because, so I think it was Sophie who said, sometimes we hear the comments, oh, my grandmother went through this, or my mother went through this and she seemed to be okay. Why is it now that I'm going through it and I'm completely falling apart? And I know that we sometimes do have that tendency to compare ourselves to generation past and think that maybe we're not measuring up, or maybe we're not as strong as they once were. But I think, it's something that Val said that really made me think, it was for some of our, generations past, it was survival. Like, it was do this or you are going to be killed. You are going to be destroyed. But that memory has been passed on intentionally or unintentionally. And many of us have adopted this strong Black woman complex. And for some of us, in some situations, it is doing us harm. Someone said something on here that I really want us to touch on. She says, please, we need more Black women in therapy. And I want to direct this to Faye now, because Faye is a counsellor. Faye, from your experience, why do you think it is that, because I think it was Sophie, you were saying, when you stood up in church or, or when you maybe explained to people that you had an eating disorder, people were like, what? How, almost like, how can a Black woman have something like that? How can,
I've had the way people responded.
Say that again?
That was some of the ways people responded.
It's shocking. I was having a conversation with Faye and I said, sometimes we've got a lot going against us. You are a woman. How dare you be depressed? I mean, you're supposed to be able to just handle all of life. You're Black. How dare you? How is it possible? How is it conceivably possible that you could be depressed? How could you be going through anything that you can't handle? And then you're Christian, a Christian Black woman. I don't know, Auntie Val, what you think about that, but sometimes I think that we can be like at the bottom of the food chain, so to say, in that we're not allowed to experience anything in a human way. It's almost like we're expected to be superhuman, to be able to just keep going regardless of what life throws at us. I was on Facebook. No, sorry, I was on the internet, on Google, and I was doing a search for strong Black woman, and strong woman, and I was just quite horrified, if I'm honest, about the amount of like little pictures and little quotes that came up glorifying being beaten down, broken down, and ill-treated, and still being strong. Like, what is this obsession about? And Auntie Faye, why is it that we're not seeing, or maybe it's changing now? I think someone said that earlier, that maybe we're experiencing a change now, but what is it about us that we seem like, why is therapy or seeking counseling or getting professional help seen as a sign of weakness, something that we want to shy away from?
I think culturally we haven't been encouraged to seek counseling or therapy of any description. I think within the church, definitely not. We were trying to do some work in one of the churches, and it was really difficult. And one of the pastors said it's really difficult to get anybody, church people, into therapy, and Black people in general. I think male and female, it's very difficult to get us into therapy. We haven't been encouraged because, I mean, if even from from children, we've been encouraged to keep our stuff to ourselves. Our stuff belongs to us, so therefore you don't share it. So imagine growing up with that notion that you don't share. And then, you're suffering in silence, you're suffering with eating disorders, you're suffering with sexual abuse, you're suffering with various different, you're suffering with anxiety, depression, all the things, but you're not encouraged to talk about it. So within the counseling profession, they realize that within not just, as Val said, not just Caribbeans, but you know, of other nationalities, of color, people of color, they have not been encouraged to go into therapy. So it's really educating us that therapy is a good place where you can, you know, you can share, you can talk, but it's not something that, you know, we do. And I think it's changing, and it's slowly changing, but it's really putting it out there to say, actually, it's a healthy thing. It's healthy, it's necessary, and it's useful. I always think it's useful to talk about, you know, when I started, you know, my therapy, it was useful to talk about all the various things that happened in my childhood, to get it out. And I think even now I work with children and I say to them, black and white, I say to them, talking is a way, or it's a language, you know, it's a way of getting it out. You put it out there. Once it's out there, it no longer has the hold or power over you. And so therefore you can move forward, because you know, that's really what you're in therapy, taking people is forward. So we have to educate within the church. And, you know, now actually, as you said that, I'm thinking, I haven't seen that many black clients. I have not seen white, yes, black, no, I haven't.
It's sad. I know people who've had their marriages fall apart because they knew that something was wrong, but they were just so reluctant because of the stigma of counselling that they rather went to divorce, and then look back in hindsight of, actually, you know, we could have gotten help, we could have talked about it. And I saw this film once, and it was talking about the difference between counselling in terms of America and the UK. But I think it's quite apt for this conversation. It was saying, you know, some people think when they go to therapy, oh, I want to get better. And a lot of people, another set of people have an idea of, well, if you're going to therapy, there must be something wrong with you. And I think that we very much have that sort of concept as a black community, because it's kind of like, well, if you're going to speak to someone, there must be something seriously wrong. As Faye was saying, if you need to take it outside of your own house and your four walls, there must be something seriously wrong. And this is like, we kind of don't, and to be honest, it just makes me so sad. I don't know if my friend is listening. I hope she is, maybe she's not. But she was just saying about someone spoke to her about going for counselling. She'd never considered it. And just on going for a few sessions, she was like, it's just so helpful just to kind of talk things through and to have this kind of self-awareness of things that I am doing or been doing. And like, okay, why do I do that? Where's the basis of that? And I just get really sad. I encourage people to go counselling all the time. I think people get sick of it. They're like, oh, there's a problem in my marriage. And I'm just like, have you ever considered like counselling? And they're just kind of like, why would I speak to somebody? No, I don't want to do that. But I think it's about encouraging and trying to break the stigma of, it's not because it's something wrong, it's because you want something to get better. And I think we have to let people know that that's what counselling is. It's about a way to get better. And I think sometimes, if I'm being honest, the reason why we struggle about it in church, especially with Christian counselling, is because of confidentiality.
Yeah, 100%.
And sometimes people are worried about, if I share this deep-seated traumatic experience that I have been through or am going through, will that stay private? Like, will that be shared amongst other people? And then it be seen as a weakness, because I guess sometimes we have this wrong concept of what makes us, or what is the definition of a Christian. You know, the idea that the Christian is the person who doesn't go through anything because they have Christ, but it's actually, you know, we're the ones who go through the same things that everybody else is going through, but we actually have Christ with us, and he makes the difference in those situations. And I feel like just breaking down that kind of stigma, I just think it's just so important, because what I've seen for when I used to work as a teens, in the teens department for our church, you would see these children coming up after they spent a week with us, telling these traumatic testimonies of abuse that they had been through, and uncles that had abused them, and domestic violence that they had seen in their home. And what you realize is that people are dying for an outlet. They are dying to and they don't even know it, but they're dying to communicate, because there is something innate in us that I believe God has put in us. And that he talks about in the Bible about, there's something powerful about sharing and talking and speaking your story. And what happens is, if people aren't given a safe place to do this, they do it in a place which is unsafe, where other problems arise, or they take it out on themselves, or they take it out on other people. And that's why counselling is so important, because it's supposed to create a safe space to have those conversations and to have those dialogues. And if anyone is listening who is thinking about it or second guessing, just do it.
Please.
Just do it. Like it's so powerful. It's so powerful. And I know that I wouldn't be the person I am today if I hadn't gone through counselling at the various times I have in my life.
Thank you so much for sharing that. We have another comment, probably one of the last few that we're going to share, because I'm mindful of the time and I'm mindful of you ladies. I promised it was going to be an hour. There's always
I'd like to follow up from what Sophie's saying after the comment.
No, go ahead, because it might take us off track. Go on.
Okay, so and what Faye said as well.
I'm sorry, Auntie Val, I'm struggling to hear you.
Oh, I was just saying I'd like to take those points forward, because you're talking about counselling, which is very individualistic and very useful. But there is, as I alluded to before, the Caribbean culture, I just refer to sort of post-enslaved communities, right? They emerged to fulfill a particular function. The whole plantocracy was there to fulfill a function, and we might call it Grenada, Trinidad, Jamaica, Barbados, or whatever, but fundamentally these were plantation spaces to meet the economic needs of Western society. And the only way that that could continue was to maintain the pathologies within those communities. So after so-called independence, the work, the sort of the therapy and the interventions required to position these cultures in a more healthier plane hasn't taken place. And I see the church as having an important role to play in doing this work, because if these conversations continue and people, we work with therapists and whatever, many of our pastors will become unemployed, because there is, in front of, ministers have this, sometimes 1,000 people. Most of the churches in London, for example, the large churches are Black-led churches. Some are African Caribbean, some are a combination of African and African Caribbean, but definitely people from cultures that have experienced a lot of trauma, trauma that has not just personal trauma, but systematic trauma in order to maintain oppression. So we have to get to the root. How did the society begin? What were the arrangements within those societies? We have to let people understand the social construction of their pain. As an individual, you can feel the pain, but where do we track it? Where does it, when we go past our parents and past our grandparents, where else do we need to go? And that is the work of what I would call sort of sociological therapy, right? As well as when you look into the scriptures and how the Old Testament tells a story of a pathologized people and the way in which God instructed the production of new memories to bring people from enslavement to liberation. And then they were still falling all over the place, but to move, and he continues to work with communities. So the narrative and the template and the methodology in terms of working with cultures is in the scriptures. And the churches have a responsibility, I believe, to do that work. To do that work.
Do you think we have that responsibility is there, but do they know how to do that work?
That's the question.
Do they know how to bring it forward, Because you said you have to go back, we are here, then our parents are here, our grandparents are here. And I think it goes back to, I often think with slavery, the enormity of it, I can't even understand it, the enormity and the impact of it. It's there. It was what, 400 or 500 years ago? It's still, now I was saying to Naomi, there's a book I'm reading called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. I think we're replaying that.
Absolutely.
It's just there. And unless and many times we're told, it happened then, so let's not talk about it. But because then is now. You have to link the past with the present, the past. The two go together, and then you can sort things out.
We have to get the ministers we have to get them to see the importance of this work. Because if Moses had to do that, if Moses was instructed to do that work with those people, when he brought, you know, God is sort of screaming at us like, there it is. Can you follow the template? And we have so many leaders, so many. There was Moses. So it's not impossible. It's not, this is what can be done. It can be done. And so that's what I need to get out there as a sociologist, because we generally leave it at the psychological level and the personal level, and people go away and work on themselves, but they still face a pathologized community. And so that, because we know who we are as a result of other people as well, we come into relationships with people, and our identities are carved through interactions with others. So if you're dealing with all this pathology all the time, if you're a child and you take the child for therapy and they go back into that home or back into that church, and one of the things that we haven't mentioned is the incredible impact that racism continues to have on the construction of identities for Black people, particularly Black women. So, you know, there's all of that work as well. And I believe that the church can do this because they're working with such large groups of dedicated people who are crying out for healing. And if they could just shift from the theological perspective, or expand their theological perspective to see the way in which God has laid out the healing plan for post-enslaved people in the scriptures, the churches would just explode. You know, they would just be so huge. People from the so-called secular society would be coming into the church because those communities would be seen as relevant and as healing spaces, not just for individuals, but also for cultures and also for families.
You know, really... Sorry, go on.
Sorry, I was just going to say, it really this is just quick, so I'll finish up quick so you can speak, Faye. You know, just what you were saying, Val, just reminds me of scripture in the Psalms when David says, you know, I will see the goodness of, I'm paraphrasing here, I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. And something that I think that we talk about so much in Christianity is the hereafter goodness of when God will come and everything will be healed there. And all the pains and all the trauma of slavery and abuse and mental health, all of that is going to be healed, and then there'll be no more tears and everything will be perfect. And like you're saying, so many times God is saying, actually, there is goodness that I want you to experience down here that is possible. Like, it's possible for you to have a good life in this world, to be healed from things that you've gone through in this life. And we have to stop pushing it off to a further time, because it's hard work and it's going to take a while, and it's going to take dedication, and it's going to take tough times, but it is actually possible. And I think that is something very powerful in what you were saying.
Absolutely. Now, I'm sorry, go on, Faye, go on.
I was going to say, one of the things that Val said, and you said, I think Moses, you spoke about Moses, and I think Moses, when God chose Moses was fearful. And he said, Moses had to come to that place. You know, that word for me, I think, because I think in counseling, that comes up a lot. The underlying stuff going on with people is fear. Moses was fearful. God said, I will do this for you. You know, and I think when our ministers and people within the church, you know, confront the fear of change, the fear of finding out, you know, that you're hurting, or the fear of sadness, then I think we can move forward, you know. And there was something you said about just, you know, too many things trying to remember. He said something, I said, yeah, it's right. When we can move, we can move, you know, we can move forward, and we can embrace, you know, healing is today. It's not, we do speak of we do speak of heaven as it's this faraway place, because actually we don't want to confront today. Today's heaven is over there. So let's focus on heaven and forget about, you know, the stuff going on now. And I think when we do, as you said, Val, when we sort out and Sophie, the here and now, and let God heal us in the here and now, because that's what he's saying. You're living in this life. I'm talking to the three of you, and we're interacting in this life together. In heaven at the moment. So let's look at what we have. And I think when the church comes to addressing our deep fears, our deep anxieties, we can move forward. And you have to get people to talk about stuff, things that they may not have talked about for years, and cry and weep, and, you know, and then we can have healing, I think. Believe so.
Auntie Val, you mentioned something. You said that people work on like the emotional or the personal, but then they go back and kind of replay that. You said that, what did you said, is it sociological therapy? Is that what you said?
Uh-oh. What happened there?
Can you hear me?
No, I didn't hear anything. You just
let me say that again.
Your internet connection is unstable. Oh, it's fine now. I don't know what's happened. You just froze.
Oh, dear, sorry. Auntie Val, you said that, you know, people will focus on themselves and work on themselves and trying to get better, but then still find themselves replaying the same, I guess, scenario, same situation again. You said that they need, you said, did you say sociological therapy? Is that what you said?
I might have said cultural therapy. I don't know. I was just sort of cultural therapy. Yeah, sociological therapy. Yeah.
Well,
that's what I'm presenting as one of the solutions, not just the psychological.
Well, that is definitely, you know, let me just say, I did plan in this session that I would not call her Auntie Val, but I can't help it. I've known this lady all of my life. Anytime we have a conversation, in fact, you know, what Sophie was mentioning, Auntie Val, we had a conversation about that just, what day was it? A couple of days ago or early, you know, sometime during the week, about what's possible here on this earth. And what I would, for those of you who are listening, you know, I'm looking at the time, we obviously can't even unpack this fully the way that we need to. And I really want to dig deeper into what Auntie Val has just shared. But I really want us to look at that. Did you say the cultural therapy or the sociological therapy? I would love if we can at another date go into that a bit deeper, because I just find that fascinating. For those of you who are watching and who maybe you're interacting with League of Extraordinary Women for the first time, we will be having other future events and seminars like this for you to be able to get involved. And we have a partnership with Crystal Waters Counselling, run by Faye here. We have, I have also spoken with Auntie Val, and she has agreed to be, you know, in the future to be able to do some workshops for us that we're going to be having coming up in next year. So for those of you who really want to be hearing more about this, by all means, do stay close to us, because we have a lot more planned. Someone just said we need a part 2 of this. I don't even know if part 2 would suffice, to be honest. I think we need to go a lot deeper with this. And for those of you who've interacted with us before, you may recognize Sophie. She was the host for our last conference that we had last year. So I'm asking, ladies, would you be willing to come back again in some form, not necessarily like this, but just continue with the work that League of Extraordinary Women is doing, you know, in partnership with yourselves to really, I guess, find that healing space, and to, you know, be able to continue working on us becoming better versions of ourselves and becoming the women that God would have us be, even whilst we're here on this earth. And if you ladies would be willing to do that, I would be most gracious, as would every single woman watching, I'm sure. I want to read out a few comments quickly, because I realize I have completely neglected Facebook, and I'm seeing comments coming in. I've even been receiving messages that WhatsApp messages are coming in as well. So forgive me for those of you who've been connecting on WhatsApp, connecting on Facebook. I was so engrossed in the conversation, I actually put my phone down, and I haven't been paying attention at all to this. Let me see, am I going to find it? Someone has sent in a comment. They've asked to remain anonymous, and so I'm going to respect that. And she says that she thinks that one of the reasons she suffers from depression and anxiety is because she feels that she must be a strong woman. It's not so much that I was pressured into being that way, but seeing my mum being resilient during her hard times, I really wish that I could give up on life sometimes, but that strong Black woman in me just won't allow it. It may sound like a good thing, but it means that I don't allow myself to just lay on the ground when I need to, metaphorically speaking, and just acknowledge, accept, and even wallow in self-pity. I do wonder if I would actually be stronger if I allowed myself to do that. Ladies, I want to just ask quickly before we wrap this thing up, in light of that comment that has come through, do you ever feel that the strong, well, we mentioned it before, Auntie Val, you said that it was about survival, but can you ever see a place for that strong Black woman persona being vital to our existence here on this earth?
Well, in many ways, it served us when it was used. If it was, you know, if during the time of slavery and you know, historically, it's helped us in many ways.
I'm talking about present day. So, like this lady says,
I think
because of her need to be strong, she doesn't allow herself to fall apart when she needs to or when she wants to. She forces herself to remain strong. Do you think that's a healthy? Do you think it's counterproductive? Do you know, does it have its place today?
It does have its place. What I would say to that participant, because it sounds like somebody needs something now, is that she needs to practice in very small things in life, in her everyday activities, in her everyday conversations. She needs to practice saying no. And she needs to practice, it's very painful. It will be very painful, and she needs to practice, not when it's going to make things fall apart, but maybe when it's going to make somebody upset. She needs to, this is how she will connect with herself more. If she just says no very politely, or if something is happening, she doesn't try to rescue the situation. She sits still, she holds herself still, or she walks away. But if she does these things in small ways, she's going to discover something very interesting, which is that she will begin to feel. She'll begin to connect with herself more. But she has to do it in a way that where she feels safe, because she needs to connect with herself more so that when she has to be strong, she can be strong. To be a strong Black woman and being strong are two very different things. She needs to connect with herself to gain the strength to be strong when she has to be strong, but to also have the strength to be vulnerable. The strength, part of somebody, I think Sophie said it, vulnerability is part of strength. And they're now saying that in order for Black women to embrace, to go forward, I'm sort of going into something else, but vulnerability is almost like a sort of feminist act for Black women. It's a liberation act for Black women. Yes. And so she's got to embrace her vulnerability to find herself and to feel. And then when, you know, with time, she will know when to be strong, and she'll have the resilience and the resourcefulness to be strong, not fall apart when she really needs to be strong.
On that note, I've got a comment just come in. It says, I can listen to Dr. Val all night. Don't let her log off. You're not allowed to go, Dr. Val. Ladies, I'm mindful of the time. We're going to wrap up shortly. But before we do, I just want to ask you ladies just to think about one thing that you would want all of our viewers to be able to walk away with. If they were to forget everything that they have seen and heard tonight, and they were just to take away one thing, what would that one thing be? But before I ask you to share with us what that one thing is, I want to just read that poem again that I shared at the beginning, because I know some of our participants missed that earlier. Just to bring some context, and ladies and gents, for those of you who are on as well, both on Facebook and on Zoom, I found a poem this morning. I don't know who it was written by. I wish I did so I could give them credit, but I wanted to read this to everyone, and I read it right at the beginning of this evening's broadcast, because I felt that it really encapsulated really well exactly what it is that we've been talking about here this evening. And it's entitled, "The Strong Black Woman is Dead." And I've adapted it a little bit to make it today's date. On the 26th of October, 2018, at 11:55 p.m., while struggling with the reality of being a human instead of a myth, the strong Black woman passed away. Now, medical sources say she died of natural causes, but those who knew her know she died from being silent when she should have been screaming, from milling when she should have been raging, from being sick and not wanting anyone to know because her pain might inconvenience them. She died from an overdose of other people clinging to her when she didn't even have any energy for herself. She died from loving men who didn't love themselves and could only offer her a crippled reflection. She died from raising children alone and for not being able to do a complete job. She died from the lies her grandmother told her mother, and her mother told her about life, men, and racism. She died from being sexually abused as a child and having to take that truth everywhere she went, every day of her life, exchanging the humiliation for guilt and back again. She died from being battered by someone who claimed to love her, and she allowed the battering to go on to show that she loved him too. She died from asphyxiation, coughing up blood from secrets she kept trying to burn away, instead of allowing herself the kind of nervous breakdown she was entitled to, but only white girls could afford. She died from hiding her real feelings until they became hard and bitter enough to invade her womb and breasts like angry tumors. She died from always lifting something, from heavy boxes to refrigerators. She died from being responsible because she was the last rung on the ladder and there was no one under her she could dump on. She died from sacrificing herself for everybody and everything, when what she really wanted to do was be a singer, a dancer, or some magnificent other. Ladies and gentlemen, the strong Black woman is dead. In closing, ladies, what is it that you would want those of us watching on Zoom and on Facebook, whether live or on the replay, what would you want them to be able to take away? Oh, I think we've lost Auntie Faye. Maybe she'll be able to come back.
Faye's just disappeared.
Yeah, literally. I think for me, when I first heard that poem, to be honest, I actually found it quite hopeful, because I think that death and life are actually very much linked. And in the death of the myth of who we think we should be or who we've told that we should be, there is a freedom in actually discovering who we are. And as Faye was saying, who is not in the conversation anymore.
I think her battery died.
Okay, that there is, a lot of times there is fear in, if I'm not this, then who am I? Like, if I'm not strong, if I can't deal with it, who am I? And just that journey that happens and the journey that I'm on when you're thinking about not who I should be, but who I am and who I was called to be, and letting go of the myth and the death of that is actually a freeing place to be. And I would say to anyone listening that, as Val was saying, you know, sometimes it's about taking those small steps, and finding who that person is. Because if we're lucky, we get 2 lives, but we get one down here, and we were supposed to have it abundant.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be abundant. And being who society or who other people want us to be, it's not enough. It's not enough. Like, you deserve more. So if you're listening, you deserve more than that. And don't be afraid to take steps into that, however slow that might be.
Thank you, Sophie.
Yeah.
Auntie Val.
Yeah, that word abundance. Beautiful. I just, there's so much I want to say, but I think I have got to go back to the beginning. And the beginning for me is Genesis, where it says, you know, God spoke. You know, God spoke and stuff happened when God, you know, the world came into being when he spoke. And I know the scientists will have a different interpretation, but definitely there is a relationship between speaking and reality. And that's, we're doing that now. We're speaking, and we're speaking stuff into a space which is taking shape, you know. So stuff is taking shape as we're having this conversation. And I think that, you know, if there's nothing, you know, if you can't afford a counselor and you can't do this and you've got anxieties or whatever, but you can connect with what God has made available to us, which is the beautiful gift of speech.
Yes.
And thought. Obviously not everybody can speak, but everybody in one way or other can communicate, or most people can. So we can align ourselves with this eternal law, with this eternal gift this abundance, the law of abundance that God has made available to us, which is that we can speak blessings into our lives and into, you know, into the lives of the people into our community, and speak blessings for ourselves as women, you know, to say it's okay. It's that abundance, the road to abundance is vulnerability and surrender before God, and vulnerability before, you know, each other. We can speak healing into our lives, and God has made that available to us, just so, you know. So I think, you know, if there's anything that, you know, on the Sabbath, I mean, maybe not everybody who's listening is the Sabbath keepers, but one of the gifts of the Sabbath, and certainly sort of in the Judaic culture, they use it to bless their communities, to bless their families. And maybe we need to start practicing things like that, that on the Sabbath, you know, there you are, you know, that we are, you know, our children, our friends on the phone, our parents, we use it as conversations of healing and blessing, and set ourselves free from myths that are besetting us.
Can you not hear me?
Yes.
Hello, Faye.
Yeah, the charge, it was like, when someone was speaking, I saw it going, I'm thinking it's going.
I can see you, yeah.
And then I had to rush off and then to get it back on and sign in. So, it's still online or?
Well, Faye, you've made it just in time to share your final thoughts. Thank you, Auntie Val, for what you've just shared. So, oh, has Faye frozen? Or
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if we're going to get her back. But let me just say a massive thank you, first of all, to you, Auntie Val, to you, Sophie, to Auntie Faye, if she ever manages to hear this. Thank you, ladies, for your openness. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for the pearls of wisdom that you have dropped this evening. I really do pray that someone, at least one person on here, heard what they needed to hear tonight. That someone is going to be able to start that path to liberation and living that life more abundantly. That is really my hope from today's conversation. I'm hoping that someone feels now that they have permission to not be okay and to seek help when they actually need it, and know that that does not mean that they're weak, but perhaps even that may be even the greatest display of strength that they actually can give, can show. I want to say to all of you listening, whether you are on Zoom or whether you are on Facebook, that we do have a level of responsibility as well. And that if you have been affected by anything that we've shared today, if you feel that you really do need to talk, if you are open to receiving counselling, you know, Auntie Val, I know you mentioned that even, you know, sometimes we may not even be able to afford counselling, but League of Extraordinary Women has a partnership with Crystal Waters Counselling, and so we're in the process of setting something up whereby we can make that available to women who are part of League of Extraordinary Women, women who come to our events, who join us on our online platforms like this. So if you feel that you need to talk to someone, and you need to talk to someone right now or tomorrow, whenever it is, please do send us an email. Reply to the email that you got the invitation link to, for those of you on Zoom. Send us a direct message for those of you watching on Facebook, or maybe for those of you watching on the replay on YouTube. Please do head over to our Facebook page and connect with us, because we don't want to just be a platform where we open stuff up and we have these conversations that last an hour or two, looking at the time, and then run away and leave you hanging. This is all about sisterhood. It's all about taking this journey together. It's about the fact that, Sophie, I need you, and Val, I need you too, and we're on this path together, and I'm not going to pretend like I can do it and handle it all on my own. And when I take off my mask, and when I show myself to be the vulnerable person that I am, when I expose my vulnerabilities to you, knowing that you've got my back and that you've got my best interests at heart, we can grow together. The things that were once taboo don't have to be anymore. The negative stigmas attached to things that affect each and every one of us in different ways no longer have to have that same effect. That's really what League of Extraordinary Women is all about. We're all about having the conversations that we don't necessarily maybe not feel comfortable or may not even be permitted to have in certain other areas. It's a safe space for women who are striving to lead authentic Christian lives, can come together, can share, can pray together, can cry together, laugh together, have a great time, because we're navigating this road of womanhood and Christianhood, but we need to do it together because none of us are an island. And so I want to thank everyone for tuning in this evening. Again, if you found any value in what has been shared today, please do press that share button and let other women be able to tap into what's been going on here. If you haven't already done so, connect with us on social media. We've got events coming up throughout. We've got another event coming up this year and events coming up throughout 2019 as well, if God spares our lives. We want you to be a part of that journey. You'll definitely be seeing more of Sophie. You'll definitely be seeing more of Dr. Valerie Bernard Allen, and you'll be seeing more of Faye as well, and all of our other panelists who joined us on this series for the month of October. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. For those of you who are going to church tomorrow, gosh, good luck. I've got to get to church for 10 o'clock tomorrow apparently. For those of you who do keep the Sabbath, I wish you all a very, very happy Sabbath, and good night to everyone. Thank you again, Sophie. Thanks again, Auntie Val, and thank you to Faye if you ever do catch up and watch this. But wishing you all an amazing evening and a lovely weekend. Stay tuned to League of Extraordinary Women to find out what's coming next from us. But this is the end of our Friday night series from October, and we'll be joining you again real soon. Take care, everyone. Good night and goodbye.
Good night. Night.